What can you see through that window up there?
You can take a look.
I'm just
the
curious.
The tank is hot, so don't touch the tank.
It feels hot.
Oh, whoa.
Okay. You see the mush there?
Yeah. The mush is boiling.
Hi, I'm Guillermo, Senior Video Producer for Chowhound. Today I'm in Brooklyn's Navy Yard, where I'm meeting with Colin Spoelman, co-owner and master distiller at Kings County Distillery, the first one to open in New York post-prohibition. He's also gonna teach me how to make moonshine, also known as the illegal spirit. So tell me a little bit about your background and how did you end up with a distillery?
I grew up in Kentucky, and I'm from sort of eastern Kentucky, coal mining, Appalachian moonshine part of Kentucky. It was actually a dry county when I was growing up. So when we wanted alcohol, we would go to a bootlegger, move to New York, go travel back to Kentucky, and would bring back moonshine. In New York, you can get anything from any culture, anywhere in the world, right? But this Appalachian moonshine was something that was legitimately hard to come by, and people were sort of fascinated with it. To be able to share that with people got me enthusiastic about distilling, and maybe I could find a way to make moonshine myself. Moonshine can mean any illegally made alcohol. Historically, it refers to unaged whiskey. If you think of bourbon whiskey, something that goes into a barrel and ages for a long time. Moonshine is just the spirit as it comes off the still. Step one is called mashing. For this recipe, we have 5 gallons of water. We're gonna put in 4 quarts of corn, which is roughly 4 pounds. Go ahead and put 4 quarts into the mash cooker. We're getting close to the temperature at which we put in the malted barley. The corn is there for starch, and this is our barley. And the barley has been malted. What malt means is that you take seeds and allow them to begin the germination process. And by doing that, the seeds are really converting the starch that's in a dormant seed to energy for the plant to grow. This is the same enzyme that we can use to convert this starch to sugar. All right, so we're at about 155 degrees. So we want to put exactly a quart. So we're doing 4 parts corn, 1 part malted barley. Our recipe for moonshine at Kings County Distillery is 80% corn, 20% malted barley.
Okay.
So we're just gonna let this cool to room temperature so that it's not too hot for the yeast. But that's the next step, is to add kind of a thimble full of yeast for this amount. I mean, it's a small amount of yeast. And that will begin converting the sugar and oxygen into carbon dioxide and alcohol.
What does distillation mean in the simplest terms?
So in the simplest terms, distillation is taking anything that's fermented and has alcohol in it and distilling it to its spirit. You can distill beer into whiskey. You can distill wine into brandy. You can distill agave nectar into tequila or mezcal. And you can distill sugarcane or molasses, more commonly, into rum. So what we just mashed has now waited 4 days.
Yeah, sat down, fermented for 4 days.
And we're gonna load that into the stripping still.
So this is the...
This is the fermented distiller's beer. And this is about 6% alcohol, 7% alcohol at the end of that process. It's been bubbling. Now that has calmed down and it's pretty much ready to go in the still.
How drinkable is this before you...
Not very. It's chunky, it's got little bits of grain in it. It's not really designed to drink. It's designed to be distilled, so.
So that's what we'll do.
So that's that. So this still works with a heating element that you have in a hot water heater. It's just a wand that goes in here. So I'm gonna turn that on. And that's all set. So we have water going through the condenser. This is doing the distillation. So there's that 7 to 8% distiller's beer is being boiled to steam, and the alcohol has a lot lower boiling point. 173 degrees Fahrenheit is the boiling point of alcohol. So
steam starts going up?
Yeah, I don't have a thermometer up here, but I would guess it's probably around 170, 172, 173, and we're starting to get some of that alcohol vapor coming through. And then this is that cold water from just the tap line that creates cold surface area and then this is running down into a jug for collection. This step is called the low wines, which is sort of a Scotch distilling term, but it basically just means it's whiskey that you wouldn't necessarily want to drink. It's about the proof of wine. This will run for another 4 to 5 hours. Now it's time to load up the spirit still with the low wines that we distilled in the first distillation. So we're gonna take these low wines that we distilled earlier, and we're gonna put them into the spirit still.
How does it change after the second distillation? It goes from 20 to closer to 40?
Close to 80.
Oh, okay.
That's a big jump.
Right.
So this will make about a half gallon of drinkable high proof whiskey. So the still is all loaded. I'm gonna turn on the condenser water. And then I'm just gonna turn the still off, so. And now we'll just wait for, it'll probably start dripping in about 20 minutes. So this is our second distillation, or the spirit run. And you can see this is the very first little bit that's starting to come out of the still. Worth noting that this is the most toxic part of the run because there is a high concentration of methanol. So we drink ethanol, but there is another type of alcohol called methanol that will make you go blind if you have as little as 30 milliliters. So that old rumor of moonshine making you go blind is really a reference to what comes out at the very beginning. And so this first little 50 milliliters that comes out, we're just gonna throw away, dilute with water, get rid of it, because we don't wanna fool with that.
Who wants a sip of the methanol?
I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the first jar. So this is jar number 1. What we can do is actually take the proof of this jar. So that's a graduated cylinder. And then this is a hydrometer, which is just a sort of floating glass bopper. This essentially tells me the proof of the alcohol. It's measuring the density of the liquid. The more alcohol that's in there, it'll float lower. If there's more water, it'll float higher, because water is thicker than alcohol. It's reading about 86% alcohol. So what happens during distillation, you have some of that methanol and low boiling point chemicals tend to have a sort of solventy, nail polish remover sort of flavor to it. And then the high boiling point chemicals give it sort of a skunky, funky flavor, a little bit like the low wines.
Okay.
So we're trying to find the middle of the run where the flavor is best. And when I was learning to distill, I would just basically fill up a sequence of jars, and then I knew that somewhere in the middle there would be the best flavor. So this jar we've already talked about.
We know that this one's so good.
It has that kind of solventy nail polish remover. I'll say it's not too bad for
better than when it first came out, I'll tell you that.
Right, exactly. So moving on to number 3, this is generally when the whiskey starts to have the right flavor profile. So still very high proof, very intense.
But it smells like what you're used to.
Right.
Yeah.
It should smell like, people compare this to silver tequila or grappa. It should have a nice warm corn flavor. Here, around number 7, we start to fall off, and we get a little bit of just kind of a like floral, sort of like soapy, skunky. It's a very hard thing to describe.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a word for it.
A little bit.
It smells more artificial than the other stuff for some reason.
Right. Yeah.
So why do we call things like this spirit? Do you know where that name comes from?
The practice of distilling has existed a lot longer than the scientific understanding of distilling. So people would put this thing, and they knew that if they boiled it and they condensed the steam, they would end up with something twice as potent. So it was kind of, intrinsically understood that they were concentrating something, but they didn't quite know the scientific process, so it had this like mysterious, spiritus aspect to it, that the ghosts were doing some magic as they existed, and you can't really see the vapor, but you know that it's there. And moonshine specifically is the result of excise tax laws, and so people would do this at night so that they wouldn't be giving away to revenue officers that they were making an illegal alcohol. So the idea of distilling the moonshine or the vapor, the spirit, all of this sort of refers to this romantic thing that you can't really see.
That you have to keep secret, hidden.
Right. All of it is sort of all part of the same understanding and language around distilling.